Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. Patch 11.2 is coming out so soon with Season 3 endgame content rolling out shortly afterwards, which means there's massive updates when it comes to raiding content, PvP content, Delver content, but also Mythic Plus dungeons as well within Season 3. Season 2 and Plus dungeons so far found themselves to be quite popular and very successful, probably resulting in one of the best seasons of Mythic Plus we've seen so far, but it looks like Season 3 potentially could be a new competitor for the best season yet, as they're making a number of changes in order to improve the Mythic Plus experience, from brand new rewards for you to be able to obtain this season, but also new seasonal changes such as the improvement to checkpoints as well as a deserter flagging system, but also a new difficulty scaling that's arriving for the season, where even Blizzard themselves are alluding to Season 3 potentially being one of the easiest Mythic Plus seasons for anybody to get into. And I noticed that I covered all the other endgame systems from raiding to delves, but I didn't really take a good look at Mythic Plus dungeons so far on this channel, so I wanted to do a wholesale overview of everything new coming out to Mythic Plus dungeons within patch 11.2. But with that, as always, if you guys want to see more regular guides when it comes to patch 11.2 Season 3 content, then be sure to follow the channel and subscribe and give this video a like. But otherwise, let's dive right in. So with every new season, especially this is something we saw a lot during Dragonflight, there's going to be even more dungeon scaling, tuning going on, and there'll likely be a couple adjustments here, but for the most part, it seems like Season 3 could potentially be one of the easier seasons based on what Blizzard has said themselves. For the dungeon tuning and scaling for the season, they're only increasing the health of enemies by about 10%. However, creature damage is unaffected. Blizz also commented so far during the testing that we've done over on the PTR, multiple weeks of direct specific dungeon testing, the player damage this season seems to be a lot higher than expected, and the health of enemies is now being increased in order to better support some of the class's gameplay. Certain specs stick out immediately, like Balance Druids, for example, who first need to spend a couple globals applying dots to their enemies in order to do damage with their abilities, since that is how their mastery works. So for those classes, imagine you just walking in, start dotting everything, and then by the time you're done dotting it, it's all dead. So I think that's what they're just trying to do, is trying to get ahead of the curve with those type of situations as best as possible. However, they also did say that this change by itself won't necessarily help to close the gap between player damage and creature health. Therefore, the net effect should be that Season 3 dungeons, by their words, will feel slightly easier than the equivalent difficulty of Season 2 dungeons for a similarly geared character. This is massive because Season 2 War Within has been fairly easy, very accessible for a lot more players with a bunch of new rewards, and it's also the most popular season of War Within, but I'm also pretty sure it's one of the more popular seasons we've ever had. The only one that maybe beats it is Season 3 of Dragonflight, which was also notoriously easy to gear, easy to play, easy to do anything season for Mythic Plus. So Season 3 could potentially be an even bigger season than Season 2. It also helps that they've also done a bunch of tuning for a lot of the pain points within some of the returning dungeons. A lot of the War Within dungeons are tuned fairly well, but some of the returning ones like Halls of Atonement, which is a fan favorite from Shadowlands, which is by no means a fan favorite expansion, also get tuned where enemies before Echelon are all reduced in power, either nerfed through damages or reduce the density, like right before Echelon, which was super annoying. Some of the mechanics that affect the pets no longer affect pets, like a stun, so there's plenty of other classes that are pet realigned that are actually getting more damage out of it, and they also increase the cooldown for many of the abilities of enemies within Halls of Atonement, which means they won't cast those spells as frequently, further softening the dungeon experience. Then we also have Tazavesh Solia, or Solia's Gambit version of Tazavesh, which is like the tail end of Tazavesh. A lot of the Murlocs at the very beginning do have this mechanic where they put down a fish stick that will end up healing other Murlocs. Previously, the fish stick was counted as a quote-unquote totem, and totems can actually ignore a lot of AoE damage. Like, you can have a totem, quote-unquote, get hit by a meteor. Because that meteor doesn't necessarily need a target to hit, it deals AoE damage, but the totem ignores AoE, so even your hardest hitting abilities would not hit the totem. That means everybody has to hard switch to fish sticks, but some classes are just not designed to be able to easily swap to targets because they'll either lose damage or lose a proc or things like that. And now they made these fish sticks no longer count as totems, so now they can be cleaved down by every other class, so the entire class kit can no longer be ignored with these fish sticks altogether. This is such a nice quality of life adjustment, plus with the number of different enemy nerfs and boss nerfs they've done for many of these dungeons over the last bit of testing. It does seem that the experience within these dungeons should be much easier heading into this season, which is amazing for new players first diving into Mythic Plus in War Within, or players that have been around but never really tried group content, and this may be one of the best seasons to do group content dungeons in particular. Now, another awesome aspect about Season 3 dungeons is not specifically a Mythic Plus change, but rather a brand new way for you to experience one of the seasonal dungeons this season. One of those dungeons is Tazavesh, which is a returning dungeon from the expansion of Shadowlands. Back during that expansion, it was a mega dungeon, and Tazavesh will be retaining some of those mega dungeon qualities, which are unique qualities to basically make like a mini raid type of experience. That's why Tazavesh will be available on multiple difficulties, from a Mythic 0 version to the Mythic Plus version, those separated into 2 separate dungeons, as well as a mode called a hard mode version of Tazavesh. Hard mode version of Tazavesh was something you could unlock after a questline back during Shadowlands, but this time around it'll be something that'll be made available separately from the get-go as its own mode, a hard mode version of Tazavesh, which will be available, I believe, once Season 3 officially launches. So this isn't something that technically will be up once 11.2 is out, but a week after, when the proper Season 3 content has begun. And the way that hard mode differs from the original Tazavesh was a lot of the enemies are just going to be made harder within that dungeon. Enemies are going to be significantly more challenging. Most enemies will have more health, more damage, which is very similar to like a +10 difficulty, and they'll also have a recommended item level for you of at least 707 in order to give it a go, but you can definitely try it at a lower level as well. What's also notable is the original hard mode version of Tazavesh also had new mechanics for some of the different bosses, like maybe you'll have new enemies present within the encounter, or some of the mechanics will be adjusted. So the fights were harder, not that much harder, but they were noticeably harder. But if you do Tazavesh on hard mode, you don't have to deal with the Mythic Plus system of timer or affixes, so you could properly treat it like a mini 5-man raid. And that could be part of your progression for the season, is progressing through hard mode or Tazavesh until you can clear this place on no deaths, because you will get a special reward if you don't die as you clear through the instance. Right now, it looks like all of the bosses are marked to drop hero track gear instead of your normal champion track gear that you would get from a basic Mythic 0 version, which means that doing a hard mode Tazavesh weekly can upgrade the type of loot that you could potentially get from this instance, which gives players a new way to experience dungeons. Like if you're someone who is maybe getting into Season 3 Mythic Plus for the first time, but you were always intimidated by the timer and the affix system, but still want a challenging difficulty from group content that dungeons can offer, then Tazavesh hard mode has this mini raid version. Then Tazavesh hard mode will serve as like a mini raid for you to complete on a weekly basis, offering comparable rewards without any of the sweat that comes from the Mythic Plus system. Another feature that's also very much a welcome change within the Mythic Plus ecosystem for Season 3 is the new form of dungeon waystones. Very similar to the meeting stones outside of dungeons, you'll now find a shard of that meeting stone called a dungeon waystone once you get a checkpoint obtained within one of these dungeons. Normally checkpoints update depending on the bosses that you kill. However, there's never really been a visual way to represent where you are with your checkpoints. So you had to learn what the checkpoints are at every single interval for every single dungeon of every new season. And that just made things very confusing, so Blizz just simply added a way for them to add a visual checkpoint in the game. Like an actual stone you could see in-game, but also a checkpoint that you could see on the map, so every time you release, you know exactly where you're gonna release at, and now you are aware when the checkpoint has been reached for each and every single one of the dungeons, so you don't have to memorize every single instance of every new season. On this channel, we mentioned the system briefly, but it is going to be a pretty core system of the Season 3, and that is the deserter system of this dungeon season. players leaving Mythic Plus dungeons early can definitely be a frustrating experience, specifically for more casual players or newer players to the system, especially when you have like 4 out of 5 people that are willing to get through the rest of the dungeon, willing to finish it for the end. Maybe you want a great vault slot, or maybe you're just looking to get, a different key. Maybe you're looking for a very specific item, but then one person dips, and now that final boss that you were so close to defeating has just gotten significantly harder to complete. So for players who leave early, there's now going to be a deserted system. When a player leaves a group early, they'll actually get a warning message telling them of this penalty, and if you leave early enough, you'll actually get a deserted debuff. The way to avoid getting a deserted debuff now would be to get a vote window to open up whenever you're in the dungeon. Like if the key is absolutely just impossible to complete, everything is going wrong, everybody's tired of the key, the group can now vote if they want to abandon this key. And if majority of the group votes to abandon the key, then everybody will be teleported out of the dungeon without getting any deserted debuff, which is the way that you can end that dungeon early without anybody getting penalized. However, people that are leaving early, that are getting penalized and are put with a scarlet mark on them, they will now be seen in LFG by everybody. When you sign up for a group, that group will be able to tell that it's a deserter trying to sign up for my weekly key. Or if, let's say, there's a group listed like we see right here, you can see every person that has a deserter. So this will give players a bit of an idea as to which groups are clean, which ones are not, and will let you avoid players that are more likely to abandon keys early if, let's say, you're just trying to get your weekly keys out of the way. Now, if you do decide that you want to remove this deserter debuff in order to, I'm assuming socially players that do have this scarlet mark will probably get less invites into groups because, who wants a lever inside of their weekly keystone? So if you are trying to remove the debuff to increase your opportunities within M+ social system, then you'll just need to finish a dungeon all the way to the end. Whether you time the key or don't, as long as you finish it all the way to the end, then you'll be able to remove the debuff. So there may be an opportunity for players to do some community service carrying other players in order to remove this nasty debuff. And I'm wondering how this whole desert system is going to affect the social aspects of Mythic Plus in Season 3. I think this is definitely going to help a lot of the more casual players that are just trying to get the weeklies out of the way, but I am wondering how this will impact the high-end content as well, and if this whole Scarlet Letter type of system is going to have a huge social impact when it comes to the pugging experience. Lastly, we could talk about the rewards of Season 3. When it comes to the gearing systems that we developed in Season 2, which were fairly generous when it comes to gearing out your character, when it comes to both the crest as well as the gear you can earn, are still transitioning the same way into Season 3, which means +6 dungeons will be extremely rewarding that will reward you hero track gear, and +7s will immediately start to reward you gilded track crests, which means that gearing in the season is going to be as easy, not easier, than it was in Season 2. And a lot of the affix system and scaling for dungeons doesn't necessarily change too much heading into this season either, as a lot of the affixes and scaling is really staying about the same. Like I mentioned earlier, it looks like this season potentially could be a little bit easier than Season 2, and that one had a very good, strong early start. The only other new rewards that are coming out are going to be a brand new mount for the Keystone Master as well as the Keystone Legend achievements, and it's really good to see that they are continuing on the KSM and the KSL achievements heading into this season. First one is going to be the Keystone Master achievement, which is Azure Void Flyer, which is a gorgeous looking mount, this void monstrosity that you'll be able to ride with the armor and this claw weapon type of thing on its hands. Mandibles, I'm not really sure, but this thing looks absolutely gorgeous for a Keystone Master mount, which will require you to obtain, like before, 2,000 points within a given Mythic Plus season. And of course, like in Season 2, they added a Keystone Legend for 3,000 points for a brand new mount, and they're adding yet another one, a Scarlet Void Flyer, which is a slightly different version of the Azure one. You can see it's just a little more red, a little more pinkish, and the armor is blue instead of pink. But yeah, the differences, while they are, I think, a little bit smaller than past season, which is just a new coat of paint for the goblin mech thing, This shield looks really good, and I'm glad that they're still continuing the Keystone Legend rewards in general. I think being able to add more rewards for high-end content and pushing yourself, I think is a net positive, especially since they are looking to potentially make it this season a little bit easier. I do think they should still add even more rewards for every single season to encourage players to dive into Mythic Plus, like things like a tabard or a unique cloak, or rather a back piece, not just like a normal cloak, but like a unique cool back piece for the season. Maybe even a weapon enchant for obtaining, I don't know, 3,500 score, like anything to push players into the upper echelons of Mythic Plus to encourage more players to play on the high end. I think all of that would just make the whole ecosystem of Mythic Plus healthier going forward. But with that being said, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you guys did enjoy this update or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like. I would very much appreciate it. Also join our Discord community, especially if you want to keep up with last minute class tuning for the patch 11.2. Also, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in our next one.